But okay, so let's get into some of these little facts that the report has included. So the first overall one is that agriculture represents roughly a quarter of total emissions worldwide. So if you go and look on all kinds of greenhouse gas emissions charts on Google and all over the place, agriculture they give it somewhere between 50, here they gave 23%, they give somewhere between 15 and 23.4% depending on if you include forestry and all this to it. So this is nothing like particularly new, and it kind of meets all the other estimates that are out there. But I mean, the report really gets interesting when it talks about animal farming. But of course, agriculture alone, you can safely say it appears to be at least around 20% of all emissions worldwide. But global emissions from animal farming, so only animal farming, is roughly equivalent to the entire global transport sector, which is 14.5% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Now,
So
that,
all
that,
cars,
that yeah,
yeah, all
all
right.
cars, and I mean, we've talked about it before how the airline industry is actually responsible for around 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So, yeah,
But it's such a, yeah,
yes,
focus.
it has a huge focus on it. And I mean, the next fact that's related to this is that in Europe, the animal farming sector, and I guess this gets a bit to what you're saying, the animal farming sector is responsible for 70% of the region's agriculture emissions. I mean,
Okay, that makes sense.
staggering, staggering figures. And here's why the authors were saying that, we're not even on the right path, it seems, because although agriculture already counts for almost a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions, if left unchecked, it is projected to increase to a full 52% of global emissions in the coming decades, with an estimated 70% of that coming from meat and dairy production. I mean, that sounds like insane. It kind of also seems that perhaps, I guess, greenhouse gas emissions might become less in some other sectors. It's possible, maybe the transport sector and down the line. But yeah, so that, I mean, that's probably a very high estimate. But they do say if left unchecked.
Mhm.
Finally, you got two other interesting facts here. Industrial production of farm animals and their feed is a key driver of forest destruction and environmental degradation. Between 1960 and 2011, 65% of global land use change was driven by animal farming. Finally, related to that, over 70% of all agricultural land in the EU is dedicated to feeding livestock. So that's just because that's the one thing that's often forgotten. I think when people generally talk about the greenhouse gas emissions related to animal farming, is that you have to first grow a lot of food and then give it to them. So there's already some emissions associated with that, and then give it to them, feed them, and then after that, give that food to human. And yeah, over 60% of arable land in the EU is used to produce animal feed instead of food for people. So, I mean, Sam, you know very well that I'm vegan, so I didn't find much of these findings shocking, and I knew them from before. But I mean, this is one of the reasons, that people often cite for being vegan is the impact of animal agriculture on the planet and the environment, along with some other issues such as ethical issues. But yeah, anything surprising in these facts? I mean, the animal farming ones are staggering.
To be honest, I would nothing surprising there. To be honest, I would say that, the main problem probably is not so much that I think because of our biology and genetics, we probably gonna consume, like, large segments of society gonna continue to consume meat. But I do think we may over consume it, and there may be too many of us, to be honest, to be frank. So that's a big problem. I think I would say that besides the fact that, because most of the time it was talking about global warming, except the last 2 points that you mentioned, I do think besides the global warming aspect, I don't understand the people who are, let's say you don't believe in global warming or CO2 things. you can see the forest being destroyed and turned into a pasture or whatever for cows, or you factory of chick for chickens or whatever. So you can see that with your own eyes, and I don't, yeah, like that seems to be, I don't know, that's, I have always viewed that as a negative development. I don't understand why people tend to not care so much about that, because I just recalled, for example, all these stories about Brazil where, you know, they on purpose sometimes they set fire on
Mm.
to trees, and then they go and clean it, and then it becomes a for animal, for more meat products, because Brazil has a massive meat industry that exports meat around the world and all that. So, even if you don't believe in global warming or climate change and all that, I think this is something that should worry you, because it's destroying it's a cliche and it's a bit cheesy, but the forests and the trees and, all the good things, to be honest,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, the amount of land that needs to go to agriculture and farming is crazy. I mean, sometimes if you just go on Google News, it's not on Google News, on Google Maps, and you kind of zoom out a bit from where you are. I mean, at least I found it surprising that you straight away sometimes start seeing like huge swaths of land that go to agriculture that are dedicated to
Well,
and that's like even nearby to where there's like populations and people.
I mean, we depend on agriculture for
Yeah.
livelihood, so it kind of makes sense. But
No, for
yeah,
sure.
we need to just sort it out a little, I think. Uh,
I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
things to do. I have this other report, I mean, here that points out. I mean, this fact that I'm going to say is only at the consumer level. But if not,
hmm
a third of all food is wasted. So, I mean, we definitely produce much more than we need, but some goes to waste because of all kinds of issues. And this latest UN report says that at the consumer level, 17% of all food is wasted. And 10 to 11% of that is due to households, which that is pretty decent, not so high. So households on average waste 10%. But yeah, like a third of all food goes to waste based on cooling issues, transportation, and all this.
I
And
There
then
is a segment done by John Oliver. I think he did it before Trump became president, because to be honest, I stopped watching after Trump's presidency. But there's a great segment about the fruit industry and how about one third or two-thirds of fruits gets thrown away just because they don't look
yeah,
right in stuff like presentation in supermarkets, and the value of, like, it's not worth selling them because transporting them to the buyer costs too much, so they're just thrown away and all that. So yeah, there is definitely those issues that need
yeah.
to be handled as well.
I mean, exactly. I mean, at the end, they just want to get rid of the food because it costs them so much. They're like, I
Put
see all these
store.
videos all the time on YouTube. They're like these vegans who eat a lot of bananas, and they go to the supermarket and they're like, "Do you have any bananas that are really ripe?" And they'll cut them up and put them in the freezer, and they just like give them cases of banana for like a few dollars, because they're gonna be throwing them out. So it just makes no
Yeah,
difference
yeah,
for
I
them because they're
understand.
too ripe. I mean, nobody buys a ripe banana. Everybody buys like very yellow or even greenish bananas.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. Right. I didn't know this money saving trick from vegan community.
But these are people who have like banana smoothies, so they consume like 10 bananas in like one meal or like
Well,
a day.
it's super cheap. I could be a guy like
Oh
that.
boy. But and then yeah, and another thing, I mean, animal farming, you need double the land and resources all the time. Water, I mean, the amount of water that you need to give to these poor cows and pigs that you're going is staggering.